The frantic mother couldn't believe what she was seeing. She didn't expect to see this. Her baby was sleeping soundly. She didn't even know it happened. The loving mother gently brushed her daughter's hair. She didn't want to wake her. Her life was going to be a nightmare after this. She had no idea what was coming. Patricia Louie had always been a devoted mother to her 2 children. They lived in a quiet neighborhood in Nashville, Tennessee. They were a happy family, but nothing could have prepared her for the shock she experienced when she noticed that there was something wrong with her 3-year-old daughter. Her stomach was a different shape. It had grown exponentially overnight. The 34-year-old mother was worried. "Are you okay, my child? Do you feel any pain?" The little girl nodded. "I don't feel good, Mom." Patricia had always been a doting mother to her little girl, Jamie. Ever since she was born, Patricia had devoted her life to ensuring that Jamie had everything she needed to thrive. So, when Jamie's stomach started to grow, Patricia was immediately concerned. Jamie's father, Paul, was worried. He was a truck driver and spent long periods away from home. He couldn't be at home when his wife needed him the most. Patricia had various theories about her daughter's strange stomach. At first, she thought it was just a case of bloating or indigestion, but as the days passed, the swelling became more pronounced, and she grew increasingly worried. Despite her fears, Patricia hesitated to take Jamie to the hospital. She was afraid of what the doctors might say, and the possibility that her daughter might be suffering from a serious illness was too much for her to bear. But when Jamie started to complain of stomach pain and became lethargic, Patricia knew that it was time to seek medical help. At first, Patricia thought that Jamie might be pregnant. It was a ridiculous thought, of course, given that Jamie was only 3 years old. It couldn't be, could it, she thought? But the idea that something was seriously wrong with her daughter filled Patricia with a sense of dread that she couldn't shake. She had to get a professional's opinion as soon as possible. The hospital visit was a blur of anxiety and confusion. Patricia couldn't believe what the doctor told her, that her daughter was not pregnant, but that there was something seriously wrong with her organs. Her heart sank as she heard some confusing words for the first time, and she struggled to keep her emotions in check. Couldn't the doctor see that she didn't understand? Taking Jamie to the hospital made things come to light. Patricia was relieved to hear that her daughter wasn't pregnant, but the news that came next was even more alarming. The doctor did an ultrasound and confirmed that there was something else wrong with Jamie. She had a rare condition that caused her organs to swell inside her body. Jamie was put on diuretics to reduce the water retention in her body, but it was clear that she needed a new heart. The doctors tried to get her a new donor, but the problem was that there weren't many toddler-sized hearts available for transplant. Patricia and her husband contacted doctors in Melbourne, hoping to find a transplant that would save their daughter's life. They were lucky there was one, but they had to go overseas. The next few weeks were a blur of hospital visits, medical tests, and medication regimes. Jamie was put on more diuretics to help reduce the water retention in her body, and she was monitored constantly by a team of doctors and nurses. The stress of watching her daughter's health deteriorate took its toll on Patricia, and she felt helpless and overwhelmed. As the severity of Jamie's condition became apparent, Patricia and her husband began to explore other options. They contacted doctors in Melbourne, Australia to explore the possibility of a heart transplant. It was confirmed. The decision to go ahead with the operation was not an easy one. They knew there were risks involved, but they also knew that it was their best chance of saving their daughter's life. The family of 3 started planning their overseas trip. They were organized for the change of country, but the journey was long and difficult. Jamie's body struggled to adjust on the plane, and she suffered from a series of complications. Patricia and her husband were constantly by her side, comforting her and providing support as she battled through the pain and discomfort. Although the operation was a success, there were some minor setbacks during Jamie's recovery. Patricia and her husband watched as their little girl fought to regain her strength, willing her to get better every day. They had to take care of her in her bed as she couldn't walk or even move much. She wasn't allowed out of the hospital. The setbacks were tough to take, but Patricia remained resolute. She drew strength from the love she had for her daughter, and from the knowledge that they were doing everything they could to help her recover. It was difficult going to the hospital every day, so they managed to get a spare ward whenever one was available. Each day was a new challenge, but they faced them together as a family. As the days turned into weeks, Patricia and her husband became increasingly anxious. They wanted nothing more than to take their daughter home, but they knew that Jamie needed to be monitored carefully to ensure that she was healing properly. Her heartbeat was slowly picking up rhythm and she was starting to gain some color back to her face. It was the small things that made her parents have hope for the next day. Slowly but surely, Jamie began to show more signs of improvement. She started to regain her strength and her spirits lifted. One day, she even managed to sit up straight on her own. "That's a strong girl," her mother said. Patricia and her husband were overjoyed to see their little girl making progress, and they felt as though a weight had been lifted from their shoulders. The doctors started some physical therapies with the little girl. They thought that it would help with her cardio exercise. They didn't realize that it would tire the small child so quickly. Amy took a turn for the worse and was bedridden for 3 days after that. Her parents were furious with the team of doctors. "My child is not some science experiment. She is alive. Have you no shame?" Paul told them. It was a difficult time for the Louis family, but they remained hopeful. They spent countless hours at Jamie's bedside, talking to her, reading to her, and just being there for her. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Jamie began to show signs of improvement. Her energy levels increased and her appetite returned. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, and Patricia felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in months. Patricia's heart sank as she heard the diagnosis. She had never even heard of restrictive cardiomyopathy before, let alone knew how to deal with it, but she knew that she had to be strong for her daughter. But the road ahead was still long and uncertain. Jamie would need to continue her medication regime, and there was always the risk of rejection. Patricia tried to stay positive, but she knew that there were still many hurdles to overcome. The little girl's recovery was long and challenging for her. Jamie had to undergo countless tests and procedures, and Patricia and her husband were constantly worried about the next hurdle that their daughter would have to face. Her body was not picking up any weight, and she always looked sick and sad. What more could they do? Her medical regimen was so strict they were sometimes afraid to touch her. The couple had been in Melbourne for over a month now. They were getting accustomed to life in a different country, even though the circumstances were difficult. Despite the challenges, the Lewis family never lost hope. They knew that Jamie was a fighter and that she would make it through this difficult time. But would they be able to make it to the final round? As the weeks turned into months, Patricia watched her daughter slowly but steadily regain her strength. Jamie was able to play and laugh again, and her parents were overjoyed to see her enjoying life once more. They were grateful to the doctors and nurses who had worked tirelessly to save her, and they felt blessed to have their family reunited. They were able to move Jaime into a normal pediatric ward. She was allowed to make friends and see the other children. It really changed her mood. As the months passed, Jamie continued to improve. She began to play and laugh again, and her parents felt as though they had their little girl back. But would she remain stable after she was discharged? For the first time in months, Patricia started to feel like herself again. She felt as though things would finally be normal again. "Maybe this time it's for good," she told her husband. Looking back on that difficult time, Patricia knew that they had been through a lot as a family. The fear, the uncertainty, and the pain had been almost too much to bear. But they had made it through together, and she knew that they were stronger for it. The couple had even more problems as the medical bills started piling up. They didn't even understand what half of the treatments and procedures were for. But even though Jamie was doing better, Patricia and her husband knew that there was still a long way to go. They were grateful for every day that they had with their daughter, but they also knew that they would never take a single moment for granted. Patricia knew that she would have to get a full-time caregiver for Jamie. She would have to go back to work when she returned to the U.S. She felt a sense of gratitude for every moment they had together, and a renewed appreciation for the simple things in life. The sound of Jamie's laughter, the warmth of the sun on their faces, the simple pleasure of a family meal. These were the moments she lived for. Eventually, Jamie was well enough to go home. Patricia and her husband were overjoyed to have their little girl back under their roof, and they did everything in their power to make sure that she was comfortable and happy. They made arrangements to return home to America. They were ready to start life anew with Jamie. It was a new world of possibilities. They were welcomed home with a beautiful party. Their friends and family were happy to see them. It was a bittersweet reunion. But even though Jamie was home, she still had to undergo regular checkups and treatments. Patricia and her husband continued to worry about their daughter, but they knew that they had to stay strong for her. Despite everything that they had been through, the Lewis family had grown even closer. They had faced their challenges together and had emerged stronger for it. The little girl knew that she was special. She was different from the other children. Her grandmother said it was because she had a soft heart. She was an angel child. The family was reunited with their elder child. They spent time together and tried to bond again as a family of 4. Patricia was grateful that her mother took care of her son while she was away. As Jamie grew older, she never forgot the love and support that her parents had shown her. She knew that they had been there for her through the toughest time.